have been listening to Motion to Adjourn with MP Chris Famous and Dwayne Robinson, JP.
Welcome back. As my co-host greatly said, we do have Dr. Bradshaw here to speak about the friendly societies and some history of post-emancipation. And obviously, probably just give a brief synopsis of that before we go to news break.
Okay. Thanks very much, Dwayne and Chris. It's an excellent opportunity. I welcome the opportunity to come and talk to the Bermudian audience. And at this time of year, when we're focusing on emancipation, when we're focusing on cup match and all that cup match involves, the community, the neighborhood spirit, when we come to all those things, we have to think of the friendly societies. Unfortunately, we often don't, because what has happened, Bermuda has been so successful. The friendly society work has been so good and has preempted and been in front of so much that people have taken it for granted. And so we need to remind people friendly societies still exist. The need for community still exists. The need to understand and remember emancipation, all that involves with emancipation, the achievement of full citizenship and full expression of each man, woman, and child. True emancipation is something that we're still striving for, and that we have made great progress in some ways in Bermuda. So this is just to give a little flavor, particularly for those who are under 40, those who are not in what should I say, it may have come from other jurisdictions and haven't heard of the friendly societies, because anyone over 50 should know about the friendly societies, because they are the lodges of our uncles, our aunts, our fathers, our grandfathers, and we have memories in the house. We tend to have forgotten some of them. So this is also intended to give an opportunity for persons to call in, give us little reflections, give maybe a shout out even to a member of your family who's been involved in the lodges, because you want to give these memories and give these acknowledgments while these people are still with us, and to also help those who don't know to go and look and find out more about their family history, their community history, because this is all Bermuda history. It's not just black Bermudian history, it is Bermudian history all the way.
Well, we appreciate that. And, on this show, we do try to bring a bit of the education portion to a lot of these events, because, as you know, a lot of the generations kind of look at cup matches just a cricket game.
Yes.
And, when we come back from the break, I really want you to, go into that, the formations of the friendly societies. We actually did another segment on this a previous year, and I think it's great to keep reinforcing the history and culture of it. So absolutely. So with that, I think I would probably ask you really briefly, because we got about 2 minutes or so, to just give a high-level explanation of what a friendly society is.
Okay. Friendly societies in Bermuda, and I have to say, I'll give a little bit later on, Bermuda friendly societies are slightly different to those you find in the Caribbean, in the UK, in the USA, yet they're very much the same. Bermuda's another world. But friendly societies are groups of people who came together voluntarily to try to improve their lives by assisting each other. Self-help, mutual help. Whether they were building houses, whether they were looking after each other in terms of not having access to medical facilities, and someone would take care of another one because somebody was sick or something. So we started the Nursing Association and all those sorts of things. So it was all about doing this without government, without the church, and doing it and not taking into account whether or not someone belonged to a different parish or a different race or etc. So it was all about self-help, mutual help, to benefit the community. That's why I emphasize the whole idea of family and community being involved.
Well, thank you for that, and I think that's a good place to go to break. When we come back, I'll dive more into it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're locked to Power 95, Bermuda's big station, at 94.9 FM, a Bermuda Broadcasting Company station.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Eloisa Mayers with Bermuda Broadcasting News with your top stories to the hour. The OBA's Jarian Richardson has been sworn in as leader of the opposition. Tributes pour in for the late Stanley Morton, and 7 people were arrested for carrying a bladed article during the cup match period. And those are your top stories to the hour. I'm Eloisa Mayers with Bermuda Broadcasting News. Have a great evening.
Okay, ready? And welcome back to Mission to Adjourn. So, just to give us a bit of a deeper dive into, friendly societies and whether you believe that Bermuda is less connected now than it was previously.
Well, Bermuda is technologically more connected. Everybody walks around with a cell phone. People have got Kindles and videos and all the rest of that. And they don't know who the neighbor is.
Yes.
And they're not even sure who the family members are. And the senior family members who are alive and who are a wealth of information, etc., the senior persons in the neighborhood who have so much information are not honored. Sometimes they are, but most of the time they're not honored. We don't have that connection to them. And I also in part blame that for, I guess I've entered the senior ranks myself. I blame that for ourselves because of the simple fact that we have not required our young people to honor and to know their seniors. I put the word required because at one time it was something that people had to know who your older family members were, had to know who your older people in the neighborhood were. And the result of all of that was these senior persons in the neighborhood looked out for young persons, guided them. I mean, helped them to understand things, helped them with connections, helped them in interactions and all those sorts of things. And the first place where that usually started was in the lodge. Now, people might think the first place that those things used to start were in the churches, but the distinction of the lodge from the church was the church was something that required a certain sameness. We had to have the same beliefs. We had to have the same structures and restrictions. The friendly society, the lodge, was somewhere where the emphasis was inclusion. It was open to everyone. In fact, although there was a membership requirement, the beautiful thing was that if you were a family member of a member of the lodge, you had almost the same access to the lodge as the actual lodge member did. Because in this idea of encouraging, sharing, encouraging involvement, encouraging the improvement of the individual, of the family, of the community, you had to get them in. So you weren't trying to put up barriers to keep people out. You were trying to say, how could I get them in? So a person would come along and not be a lodge member, but wanted to do something, wanted to have some sort of function, etc. And they would come along and ask their cousin, their brother, their neighbor who was a lodge member. And it was very easy to get access. So whether it was a matter of, as I said, for entertainment, whether it was for a matter of education. I heard a quick mention about Berkeley. Berkeley started in a friendly society in the lodge that around Court Street. Lodge site is still there. A lodge that was a Good Samaritan's lodge. When we look at our primary school, the whole of Bermuda's primary school system is almost all built originally on the lodges. Ask people about going to Hamilton Parish Temperance School and all the various schools. St. George's, a lot of people from St. George's started out in Samaritan's school down in St. George's. And you go through the various parishes and you find out that the root of the primary schools, the early primary schools, were in the lodges. Eventually, it's interesting how government started via the primary schools in the lodges and gave them a certain grant to continue with this. So this was education that was created by the community, for the community, anchored in the lodges. And eventually others were added. But the bulk of them started in the lodges. So, there's so much we can talk about when we talk about the growth of the community. And I'm sure that some of your listeners will have, particularly seniors, have gone to school at maybe the lodge in Cobbs Hill. I mentioned the one down in down by the marketplace in Shelley Bay.
Yes.
There are a number of them, different ones. As I said, persons have gone to these schools, persons were involved in these schools, and now we're talking about we need to recognize and honor these. Again, if we kept involved our seniors and our young people, and that's why we want young people to come out to the lodges and do their school projects on their history by doing it on lodge history.
Well, on that, and I appreciate that. Dr. Bradshaw, you mentioned that, friendly societies still exist. Would you be able to kind of give a brief synopsis to people who may not quite know where to find them?
Sure, absolutely. Well, one thing I will also say to people, on August the 24th, that's a couple of Thursdays coming up, there will be an event that will be held in town. You'll get more details, but there's a friendly society just opposite People's Pharmacy. And this is, it's called Loyal Flower of the Day. Most people will know it as the Manchester Unity Lodge Hall. And there we're having something that is called the Cup Match Good Sportsmanship Award. Now, this shows and emphasizes how the Friendly Society is so important to community. The Friendly Society started Cup Match. The Friendly Societies, when Cup Match was beginning to be, I'm going to put it, too much of fun and not enough of seriousness. Too much of not understanding about emancipation, not understanding about the values of the community. Too much about having a couple of drinks and a good old time and a bit of gambling and carrying on, and not about emancipation, helping each other, building up the community, improving the individual, that the lodges said, you know what? Let the clubs do this. And so they gave cup match to the lodges. The lodges gave cup match to the clubs. But cricket is a particular game. Cricket was valued and seen as something that involved teamwork. Again, a large major feature. It allowed the individual to be important, but the individual is not important without the team. It also allowed this situation of people working together, people achieving something, people taking the turn. Because when we were building houses, not everyone could get the first house. So people had to learn to help to deal with the first one and recognize that you continue to contribute, although you may be the fifth or sixth one to benefit. Exactly, you waiting your turn in cup match, you're working in the cricket and all the rest of that. But other groups focus on who made the most spectacular catch, who made the biggest score, who was the most extravagant. The friendly societies looked at good sportsmanship, who played fair, who respected the opponent, because the opponent is not your enemy. But we've seen in years past where cup match has been rude. That's the word I'm going to use. It has not involved the best aspects of the Bermuda community coming together, having competition, but not having animosity. You know, so we started something a few years ago called the Good Sportsmanship Award, where the emphasis is on, and it's decided by the umpires, again, an idea of people understanding authority and understanding how to work within a framework, decided by the umpires, who has contributed most to the total balance and conduct of the game. I remember a quick little something, and this is a little personal little quickie. I remember one of the cup match players, Stephen Bremer. Stephen Bremer is actually a family member of mine through my aunt, who is also a lodge member. And I remember a few years ago, Stephen Bremer got the cup match award from Good Sportsmanship from the Friendly Societies. Now, Stephen Bremer's made a nice little score this year. He's contributed, etc., etc. Maybe he will get some other award for, something spectacular connected with his innings, connected with his keeping wicket and all the rest of that. But when he won the Good Sportsmanship Award a few years ago, he won it because of his deportment on the field. It was his first cup match, and yet he carried himself in such a way, and it was one of those cup matches where Somerset was doing quite well, things were a little tight and all the rest of that, and people were running onto the field and being a bit disruptive. And here's a guy in his first cup match, and he went and helped the umpires. A lot of people don't want to help the umpires, the players. They're not there to help the umpires. But he actually stood up and help the umpires to control the people coming onto the field. Wasn't his job, but yet it was his job. Because just like we're all in society, it's all of our job to help what goes on in the neighborhood. It's all of our job to help what goes on in the community, in the school, in the church. Doesn't just belong to the policeman or the politician or anything else. And that's what the Friendly Societies has always valued and has always honored. And so we honor persons for what they do. Persons who, when a player on the opposition has been gone down with cramp, do you go and you help him? We've had guys who've won the awards who've done that. So on August 24th, we're going to be having this. As I said, Loyal Flower of the Day Lodge is where we usually hold it. That's just opposite the People's Pharmacy. We'll specify exactly where. And we have the umpires. We have a history of the event. We have a history of the Good Sportsmanship Award. We talk a little bit about the Friendly Societies. And we have seniors coming out. We still have seniors around who are lodge members who remember the old cup matches in, the early part of the 1900s. And they come along and they have their little bit and they say their little something, etc. And it's a nice interaction because we're also honoring the family of the recipient. Again, it's not just that thing where somebody's made a great catch, so somebody gives him a couple of dollars and he goes and sits around with the boys and has a few drinks. Here we have the family, we have the parents, we sometimes have the children, and we talk about the way this person has represented the family and their community by their deportment, by whatever event it is, by whatever contribution they've made to the game on the field for the overall good of the game. So exactly, reinforce those values.
Yeah, and so how would a person who is interested find this information? Is there a website or is there a place where you post it? Because I know you want to get the young people in. You gotta.
yes. And we are certainly trying to change that. There isn't a website. We're talking about doing something to get organized. We have a couple of projects which we want to have coming on in the later part of this year. And one of them has been talking about doing something with a website. But what I can invite people to do, there's something called the Friendly Societies Supporters page. It's on Facebook, So if they look on Facebook and they look for Bermuda Friendly Societies, there's a supporters page, and there is an amount of information that's there. I'm part of that generation. I'm sorry, we don't do the what do you call it, the social media type thing, and all the rest of that sort of thing. I'm getting there. I do a little bit of it. I don't even walk around with a cell phone. And, people wonder, like, how do you live without a cell phone? But there is some information there. But the first resource that most people have and they don't think about, go to your old aunt. Go to your old grandmother. Go to your old teacher. Go to the old people around your neighborhood. Because some of them are members. And if they're not members, they know how to contact people who are members. Chris Famous here is not a member. He should be a member. I know his family. I know the stock he comes from. He should be a lodge member. But at least he knew how to contact me.
Yes. Look, yeah.
On that note, just for historical context, post-emancipation, Can you give us? Are you able to give us the name of the lodges that existed post-emancipation, and what did they do to, how can I say, bring the people of Bermuda, the formerly enslaved people of Bermuda, out of the darkness into the light of home ownership, business ownership, and so on and so forth?
Okay, that is something that we can probably do about 5 hours of show. So just something. What I will make a quick reference to is those lodges that still exist. So, for example, one of the unique things about Bermuda is that we had a very strong, what we call, local friendly society group. Most people, when they think of the friendly societies and think of the lodges, they think of the Odd Fellows, they think of the Good Samaritans, they think of those lodges which are actually international lodges. Those are lodges that exist throughout the world. So if you're an Odd Fellow in Bermuda, you can go to an Odd Fellow lodge in New Jersey, in South Africa, in India, etc. But Bermuda started with its own local friendly societies because we had a number of free blacks. And they, again, in self-help and those sorts of things, started things in their community. And an example of one of those things which still exists, well, the building still exists, is Alaska Hall. Alaska Hall was actually the site of a local friendly society called the Working Men's Aid Helping Society and Ladies of Industry. And if you stand outside on Court Street and look up on the lodge at the Alaska Hall, you will see that plaque on the wall. People see it and don't know what it's about. And the interesting thing about that is that was started Working Men's Aid Helping Society because trade unions were forbidden in Bermuda. Ladies of industry. Ladies were not expected to be able to work and worked under very difficult positions. The lodges, as I said, actually started in Bermuda before emancipation because they started among free blacks. Talking about our local lodges. These groups started to provide what was needed for the local communities. Obviously, work conditions would be something that would have been needed for working people and those conditions. So we can trace the early lodges. Now, you will find things like various societies. All of these have declined, or I guess a correct word would be they have ceased. But all the early local lodges have been superseded by the international lodges, been superseded by the trade unions, been superseded by the political parties, been superseded by things as simple as the Bermuda Archives and Bermuda National Library, because those were why the first lodges were started. The first lodges were started by groups of black who, in post-emancipation, needed to help each other have a job, needed to help each other have somewhere to live, needed to help each other have a book, Because we think of libraries and access to books, etc. Those times, a book was a valuable thing. So somebody might have a book, and another two people might have a book, and they shared them. Think of that. Think of how important that was. They helped educate each other. So these are those early lodges started. And yet we can have, coming right up to Bermuda, Alaska Hall, a building that's still there, that is a reminder that of one of the local early friendly societies. It's one of the things that makes Bermuda unique, the way we had our traditional friendly societies. But most familiar to people are the societies that are the international ones, like the Odd Fellows. So we have Alexandrina Hall. Susie Harvey has a place. I guess it's a quick little advert for Susie Harvey's dance studio. But that's the Grand United Order of Odd Fellows. They are still very active. They have a men's group and a women's group. They are very involved. And so we have these, as I said, the international friendly societies that are still around. There are about 6 or 7 friendly societies that are still active. And you can find out more about these if you come out on August the 24th, because they will be there. You'll sometimes go to see some stalwart of the community. Recently we lost a lodge brother. Most people from down the east end of the island would know of Brother Boyd Smith. And there was a great turnout to his funeral of the various friendly societies and other organizations of which he was a part. So we have, as I said, the Odd Fellows, we have the Good Samaritans, we have that there on Cobb's Hill, still active. We have a couple of others that are active in different places. But it's important to note that Bermuda has had what we call the traditional local friendly societies, which started first, and then the international friendly societies, which everyone tends to think about.
Well, before we wrap up, I would like to just. We'll go to a break real fast and we'll circle back then. Okay, thank you. And we're back to motion to adjourn, and I'll hand over the microphone to you for any closing remarks. You want to remind the people anything?
Yes, I've just been given a note, and I'm not sure, but I understand that the August the 24th event might be scheduled at the BIU meeting hall, which is just up the street. BIU is what we would call a collaborative brother society. So I guess we'll get details of that closer to the date.
Okay.
And I know that there's a friendly society tour. Titan Tours do something with the friendly societies at this time of year, and I think Chris was going to say something about that.
Yes. I received a note, a very colorful flyer, interesting pick of colors. Bermuda National Library presents Find Your Voice in collaboration with the Titan Express is offering the Friendly Societies Tour, which is going to be on Friday, August 25th from 6 to 8. And I will give more details later on. I just want to get some clarity before they string me up and say, that's not what's on the flyer. So you go through library events at gov.pm, but Friday, August 25th. So, yes. And what's interesting to note, a lot of people, and this is something I owe a debt of gratitude to Elder Joy Wilson Tucker, who's a Lodge member.
Yes, definitely, Lodge historian.
Right. She, last year, as Dwayne alluded to, last year she spoke about the history of Cup Match, how it originated. Okay. And it originated not between the clubs, but originated from 2 lodges.
More than 2 lodges, all the lodges.
Well,
2 lodges took the leadership,
okay,
but it was all the friendly societies who contributed, the players and all the rest of that.
All right. So, in particular, the Lodge of Summer's Pride of India
in St. George's,
yes, number 899, and Lodge Victoria and Albert It was named after Queen Victoria and her consort,
Yes.
right? Concubine.
Oh my gosh.
Albert number 1027 in Somerset. So there was actually, you see how we have light blue and dark blue, red and blue? It's like people think it's 3 colors. It's actually 4 colors because the Lodge in St. George's had a certain blue, shade of blue and sky blue, and Somerset had scarlet, red, and royal blue. So it's actually 4 different colors, but this is part of the history that has gotten lost. So I want to once again thank, why I called him my elder, Joy Wilson Tucker. So Dr. Bradshaw, as we said, we want to make this a continuous thing. So thank you for the opening bell, right? And we want to, every so often have yourself and other persons to come in
I'm a large person.
and to give us the history that we were never taught in school.
And I thank you for that. And the idea is not just to give the history, but to ask members of the community to talk to their elders, talk to their aunts and grandma, look in the cupboards, look in the old cellar, and bring out those artifacts. Because one thing we have is that we have lots of little things that are hidden away. We don't remember what they're all about. And if we're not careful, when that old timer dies, we throw it away. Sometimes some of those things haven't been thrown away, and the younger people are coming along, they don't know what it's about. But when they ask the questions, and we're able to share with them and recognize things, they suddenly go, wow, I didn't realize my aunt, my grandfather was so important. Because that was the whole thing about the lodges. The lodges made everyone important. It's not about just being, the person who had all the money or who had all the stature or all the rest of that. The lodge was about participation, was about sharing, was about involvement, was about work.
Thank you so much. So hopefully we'll be able to have a follow-up with you, but we appreciate you, coming in and giving us some more insight into the friendly societies. And, this is probably going to be an ongoing series, but thank you so much. And I'll let Famous have a few words if you like.
Yes, and I would ask you to remain, Dr. Bradshaw. As we said earlier, we could not have this show today without mentioning the work of Mr. Stanley Adolphus Morton Sr., a man like Dr. Bradshaw of St. Kitts and Nevis heritage. Like what?
I didn't know you knew that.
Come on now. Work with me, doctor. Give me some credit. And comes from my neck of the woods, Parsons Road, Backerton, Fenton's Drive. A Barclayite, like Dr. Bradshaw and myself. A man who learned
school, Pawn Dog.
Right, Pawn Dog. A man who learned a trade. He wanted to learn trade to be a tailor. Then he went on to further educate himself. A man who served the Berkeley Educational Society, the one we spoke about earlier. Went on to become an MP in Pembroke East, which is a hard part of Bermuda. So I would like for you, if you could share any thoughts of Mr. Stanley Morton, Dr. Bradshaw.
It's very difficult for me, to be quite honest, because it's Mr. Morton is a representative of a certain generation of Bermudian men. Bermudian men who came in the community. I mean, I knew Mr. Morton as a young fellow as I was coming along. And these older men, they took us younger men under their wing. They roughed us up sometimes because they held you to a standard. But the important thing was that these men set an example. These men showed you by their perseverance, by the fact that, the first thing you do doesn't have to be the thing you do for the rest of your life. The job that you do doesn't have to be the only way that you make a contribution. You make a contribution in one job, 2 jobs. You make a contribution in the church. You make a contribution in the lodge. You make a contribution in the political party. And yet we have people saying now, I don't need to give back to the community. It's not part of my business. It's government's business. It's somebody else's business. So these men raised other people's children. They raised the neighborhood's children. And so when we lose men like these, it's not just the loss of Mr. Morton. It's so many people like him that have been lost. You know, you're reminded of people. I'm reminded of the loss of my own father-in-law, Rocky Rayner. I'm reminded of the loss of persons who I can think of. I can see them, I can't even think of them. But you think of the sorts of things that people have done in the neighborhoods, in the community, and we're just asking, who are the people who are coming forward to replace them? Because the community needs people in the community, needs leaders and role models in the community, even more than before. But we also need young people to be ready to accept them, not to just come along and say, well, what's in it for me?
Thank you for that.
Yes. So I would just like to close by saying something. It's a quote from Mr. Stanley Morton himself, and it spoke about the fact that people who had a background from St. Kitts and Nevis, who were from Bakaton, were denigrated, not just by lighter skinned people, but some of our own darker skinned relatives, because we had this divide and conquer that put the fact that, if your family was first generation from the islands, that you were less than, you were the bottom of the barrel. So Mr. Morton had a quote here, and it's from the Heritage Museum, so you know it's real. It was time for change. Stanley Morton was born into a family whose parents immigrated to Bermuda in late 1920s and established their early home on Parsons Road, along with several other families who immigrated to the island during that time. They were a very tight-knit group of people and supported each other in many endeavors. Sounds like the Lord's, right?
Exactly.
These people from various islands were not readily accepted by Bermudians. They were slighted and called by many derogatory names, but they were ambitious and determined to make their new island home. In a matter of months, they built up Parsons Road area, and it was noticeable amongst the islanders that they were not going to let insults hinder them, and made them more determined to move ahead. So I say that in the context that it's easy for us to celebrate cup match, put on different colors, go play crown and anchor, blah, blah, blah. But as Dr. Bradshaw has eloquently stated, that's not what cup match started from. So it's just coincidental that, I shouldn't say coincidental, the way the Lord wanted, right? In the same week of cup match, our elder Stanley Morton passed on to glory. And I just want that to be accurate, that it's all about progress. No matter where you start in life, it's about progressing. So, Brother Dawn, any closing remarks?
Not really. It's been an interesting show, a lot of information, things that I didn't know about. So, good stuff, good show.
Brother Dwayne?
As always, it's always good to get some insight into history. So, we are losing pillars of the community, so we have to give flowers to folks while they're still here. And whatever we can get from the generation before us, we should do so while they're here.
Any closing remarks, Dr. Bradshaw?
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the persons who've been listening. And I will be hoping and waiting to hope that some of these people who've been listening will follow up. We'll call in with questions, we'll call in for information, and we'll, as I said, talk to their elders, talk to the community people, and continue, because we need this.
All right, and on that note, I just want to close with two other passings. A friend of mine from St. George's, Mr. John Anderson. Some will know him as Fresh, some will know him as Bubbles. Lieutenant Bradshaw will know him as Private Anderson. and one of our greatest footballers, Mr. Dow Trott, who passed last week as well. So on that note, I just want to thank you all, and we are back. Class is back in session.
Yes, sir.
Summer's over.
Thank you.